Finally, it appears we may be getting something in the WNBA that some of us have been longing and calling for. We know the referees were an absolute joke in this league. They were awful. They didn't call any fouls. You had people getting their nose busted open, blood all over the floor with no whistles being blown. We watched Caitlin Clark get the living life beat out of her every game, being targeted and not getting any foul calls. The girl can't get to the free throw line to save her life because they refuse to call fouls for her. And it appears, shout out to Rachel Demita. She had Annie Costable on. I recommend all of you go.
For the first time in a long time, something feels different in the WNBA. Not because of a press release, not because of a vague promise, but because the noise finally got too loud to ignore. After months of outrage, viral clips, and fans asking the same uncomfortable question over and over again, the league appears to be moving toward a change many people thought would never come. And it didn't happen quietly. This moment was forced. For years, WNBA fans have complained about inconsistent officiating, excessive physicality, and dangerous no calls that put players at risk. Coaches have exploded on sidelines. Players have taken hits that should have ended plays immediately. Blood on the floor, noses busted, bodies knocked down with no whistle in sight. And somehow, the response was always the same: silence, deflection, or the idea that this was just how the game is. Then everything changed. Because once Caitlin Clark entered the league, the spotlight became impossible to escape. Every missed call was clipped. Every cheap shot was slowed down, replayed, and dissected. What had been brushed off for years was suddenly happening in front of millions of new eyes. And the league's biggest problem was no longer hidden behind niche coverage.
The girl can't get to the free throw line to save her life because they refuse to call fouls for her. And it appears, shout out to Rachel Demita. She had Annie Costable on. I recommend all of you go watch this interview at full length. Annie Costable addressed that the players in the WNBA is looking to bring in new referees, more qualified referees to create a better and a safer game. We got to get into it. Welcome to Keep the Vision. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe, share the channel, hit that bell notification, hype the video. Let's go over to Rachel Demita. Shout out to you. You doing your thing. Let's take a listen at what Annie Costable had to say on Rachel Demita's Courtside Club.
It was center stage. Fans weren't just upset about fairness. They were worried about safety. How long can a league grow if its most marketable players are allowed to be targeted without protection? How long do casual viewers stick around if what they're watching feels reckless instead of competitive? According to recent interviews and reports, the pressure finally cracked something open. The league is now actively discussing changes to officiating, including bringing in new, more qualified referees to improve consistency and player safety. That alone signals how serious this moment is, because it suggests the league is admitting what many fans have said all along. This wasn't sustainable. And this isn't just about one player. Caitlin Clark didn't create the problem, she exposed it. Her presence didn't change how the game was officiated. It changed who was watching and how closely they were paying attention. Now the real question is whether the WNBA has an officiating problem. It's whether this moment finally forces the league to fix it, or if this will become just another promise that fades once the noise dies down. Because what happens next could define the league's future. What finally pushed this issue into the spotlight wasn't a single play. It was a pattern. Game after game, fans watched the same thing unfold. Excessive contact that crossed the line, players getting knocked to the floor with no whistle, clear fouls swallowed by officials as if nothing happened. And the longer it went on, the harder it became to pretend this was just physical basketball. The most alarming part wasn't the missed calls. It was the lack of escalation. There were moments where players were visibly hurt, blood on the floor, trainers rushing out, yet play continued as if the contact was normal. That's when frustration turned into concern, because once dangerous plays aren't punished, they become acceptable. And once they're acceptable, they multiply. This is where Caitlin Clark became the focal point. Not because she's the only one dealing with it, but because the targeting was impossible to ignore, defenders bumped her off ball, hit her on drives, took away her landing space on jump shots. And despite repeated contact, trips to the free throw line were rare. Fans weren't asking for special treatment, they were asking for basic enforcement. The reaction online was immediate. Clips spread, comment sections exploded. Even neutral viewers started asking the same thing: how is this allowed? Because this wasn't toughness, it was inconsistency. And inconsistency is what turns physical play into dangerous play. What made it worse was how predictable it became. When officials don't call early fouls, defenders learn quickly. They test the limits, they push further. And when nothing happens, it sends a message that certain players can be hit harder than others. That's not competition. That's negligence. The league had seen complaints like this before, but never with this level of visibility, never with this many eyes watching every possession, and never with a star whose every move was being tracked in real time by fans who weren't used to seeing this level of officiating. This wasn't outrage manufactured by social media. It was a breaking point that had been building for years. And once it reached that point, it forced people to look back and realize this problem didn't start this season. Long before Caitlin Clark ever stepped onto a WNBA floor, the warning signs were already there. This officiating issue didn't appear overnight. It wasn't created by a single rookie season or one viral clip. Coaches have been complaining about it for years. Players have been absorbing unnecessary contact for entire careers, and questionable no calls have quietly shaped outcomes long before the national spotlight ever arrived. The difference now is visibility. Veteran fans remember sideline blow-ups from respected coaches who couldn't believe what was being allowed on the court. They remember stars from past eras getting knocked around with little protection, then being told to play through it. Even rookies from previous generations dealt with the same treatment: hard fouls, missed whistles, and a standard that seemed to change from game to game. Back then, it stayed contained. Fewer cameras, less social media reach, minimal national coverage. When something went wrong, it might spark debate in niche circles, but it rarely traveled far enough to demand accountability. The league could acknowledge concerns, offer reassurance, and move on without meaningful change. That's why this moment matters. Caitlin Clark didn't invent the problem, she magnified it. Her arrival brought in casual fans who weren't conditioned to accept inconsistency as just part of the game. They weren't emotionally invested in protecting tradition. They were simply watching basketball and asking a basic question: why aren't these fouls being called? And once that question spread, it couldn't be contained. Suddenly, longtime issues were being revisited with fresh eyes. Old frustrations resurfaced, past incidents were re-examined, and the narrative shifted from "this happens sometimes" to "why has this been allowed for so long?" That shift is what truly pressured the league. Because when the same complaints come from different eras, different players, and different coaching staffs, it stops being coincidence. It becomes a pattern, and patterns demand explanation. For years, the WNBA could afford to brush this aside. Now, with unprecedented attention on the product, that option no longer exists. And that's exactly why the conversation moved from frustration to reform, because the league wasn't being criticized by a small group anymore. It was being questioned by everyone watching. The conversation shifted the moment insiders started speaking out loud. It wasn't a leaked memo. It wasn't a statement from the league office. It was a candid interview that pulled the curtain back just enough to confirm what fans had been suspecting all along, that this issue had reached a point where players themselves were pushing for change. In a recent appearance on Rachel Data's show, longtime WNBA reporter Annie Costebal made it clear this wasn't just outside noise anymore. According to her, players across the league have been voicing concerns internally about officiating, safety, and the overall quality of the product on the floor. And that detail matters, because player pressure is something the league can't easily dismiss. The framing was important. This wasn't about blaming individual referees or replaying one controversial moment. It was about the bigger picture, how inconsistent officiating is hurting the game itself. Costebal pointed out something that hit a nerve with a lot of fans. Casual viewers don't stick around for chaos. They come for basketball. And when games start to feel reckless, confusing, or unfair, those new fans don't slowly drift away, they leave. That's the real leverage. Caitlin Clark brought in a massive audience, but that audience isn't guaranteed. They're watching closely, they're comparing what they see to other leagues, and when whistles disappear during dangerous contact, it creates distrust in the product. That's not just a basketball issue, it's a business problem. According to reports, this reality is finally being acknowledged behind the scenes. The league understands that growth can stall just as fast as it arrives. And when players, media members, and fans are all pointing to the same flaw, ignoring it becomes a risk, not a strategy. That's why this interview landed the way it did. It confirmed that the pressure wasn't just external outrage, it was internal recognition. And once a league admits there's a problem affecting both safety and fan retention, the conversation changes. Because now, it's no longer about whether officiating could improve. It's about whether the league is willing to do what improvement actually requires. What truly cornered the league wasn't criticism, it was exposure. For the first time, every missed call was being watched by millions. Every no-whistle moment was clipped, slowed down, reposted, and debated in real time. The WNBA wasn't just being analyzed by its core audience anymore. It was being judged by casual fans, former players, analysts from other leagues, and sponsors paying close attention to how the product looked on the floor. And that changed everything. When a league is growing quietly, problems can hide. When it's growing loudly, they can't. Caitlin Clark's arrival created a spotlight so intense that even routine games were dissected possession by possession. The margin for error disappeared. And once the league realized that inaction was now costing credibility, the equation flipped. According to reports, internal conversations started shifting tone. This wasn't about defending tradition or downplaying complaints anymore. It became about risk to player safety, risk to long-term growth, risk to a fanbase that had options and wasn't obligated to stay loyal if the game felt unsafe or unfair. The pressure didn't just come from social media either. It came from within, coaches asking tougher questions, players speaking more openly, media members refusing to soften criticism. And when all of those voices align at the same time, silence stops working. That's the difference now. For years, the league could say, "We're aware of it." That response doesn't hold up when every questionable call is replayed across the internet within minutes. When fans can compare officiating standards across leagues instantly, and when the same dangerous patterns keep repeating without consequences. Inaction became louder than action. And that's why this moment feels different, not because the league suddenly discovered the problem, but because ignoring it is no longer an option. The spotlight isn't going away, the audience isn't shrinking, and the expectations aren't lowering. Which leads to an uncomfortable truth the WNBA now has to face. If they want to protect the growth they've fought for, they have to protect the players creating it. And that means fixing the problem at its root, not just acknowledging it exists. Here, where the conversation gets uncomfortable, because the issue isn't just a few bad calls. It's the system itself. According to insiders, the WNBA's officiating struggles aren't rooted in effort or intent. They're rooted in structure, low pay, limited development pathways, inconsistent evaluation standards, and a lack of real incentives to attract and retain top-tier officiating talent. When you combine all of that, the result is exactly what fans have been watching for years: wild inconsistency. You simply can't expect elite officiating without elite investment. Other major leagues treat referees like a critical part of the product. They train them year-round, they pay them accordingly, they review performance aggressively, and they hold officials accountable in ways that actually led to improvement. In the WNBA, that same level of commitment hasn't always been there. And you can see the consequences on the floor. One night a certain level of contact is allowed. The next night, the same play draws a whistle, landing space fouls get ignored, off-ball contact goes unpunished, flagrant-worthy plays get downgraded or missed entirely. That inconsistency doesn't just frustrate players, it changes how the game is played. Because when officials don't set boundaries early, players test them. Physicality escalates, tempers flare, dangerous plays slip through, and suddenly the referees aren't just managing a game, they're chasing it. That's when injuries happen, that's when control is lost, and that's when fans stop trusting what they're watching. This is why players pushing for change matters so much. They aren't asking for softer basketball, they're asking for clarity, consistency, protection when the rules clearly call for it, and according to reports, this is where the league is finally being forced to listen. Because fixing officiating isn't about swapping out a few referees. It's about rebuilding the foundation underneath them. And that leads directly into the most controversial part of this entire debate, superstar protection. This is where a lot of people get uncomfortable and where the conversation often gets twisted. Protecting star players is not favoritism, it's reality. Every major professional league understands this, even if they don't always say it out loud. The most visible players are also the most valuable, not just financially, but structurally. They drive viewership, they bring in new fans, they elevate the product, and when those players are constantly absorbing unchecked contact, the entire league suffers. This isn't about giving someone free points or special treatment. It's about enforcing the rules consistently when the stakes are highest. In other leagues, this principle is baked into officiating culture. Superstars get protected because the league knows two things can be true at once. The game can remain physical and dangerous play must be shut down immediately. When defenders know reckless contact will be punished, they adjust. The game flows better, injuries decrease, and skill, not intimidation, decides outcomes. The disconnect in the WNBA is that this protection has been uneven. Some established stars have earned a better whistle over time. Others, despite carrying massive attention and responsibility, haven't. That inconsistency sends the wrong message. It tells defenders that certain players can be hit harder, that landing space can be invaded, that off-ball contact might be ignored, and once that message is sent, it spreads fast. This is where the Caitlin Clark debate often goes off the rails. The issue isn't that she deserves special calls. The issue is that she deserves the same protection the rulebook already provides. When a shooter's landing space is compromised, that's a foul. When a player is hit off ball, that's a foul. When contact escalates into danger, it should be addressed immediately, no matter who's involved. Failing to do that doesn't make the league tougher. It makes it reckless. And there's a bigger consequence people don't talk about enough. When stars aren't protected, they don't just risk injury, they risk burnout. Shortened careers, reduced availability, fewer iconic moments. That's bad for fans, bad for players, and bad for the league's long-term growth. Superstar protection isn't about ego. It's about sustainability. And until the WNBA fully embraces that reality, officiating will continue to feel reactive instead of controlled, no matter how many conversations happen behind closed doors. This is the point where frustration turns into something more serious. Because inconsistent officiating doesn't just affect the flow of the game, it affects player safety in ways that can't be undone. When dangerous plays aren't addressed immediately, they send a signal, not just to the players involved, but to everyone on the floor watching closely. Landing space fouls are the clearest example. These are some of the most basic safety calls in basketball. A defender stepping into a shooter's landing area can cause ankle injuries, knee damage, or worse. In many games, those plays were either missed entirely or not upgraded when they clearly should have been. That's not a judgment call, that's a breakdown in enforcement. Off-ball contact made it worse. hits away from the play, extra shoves after the whistle, contact when the ball wasn't even live. These moments aren't physical basketball, they're avoidable risks. And when officials don't shut them down immediately, they escalate. Players start taking matters into their own hands, tensions rise, and suddenly the conversation shifts away from basketball entirely. That's when everything spirals. Instead of discussing schemes, performances, or matchups, the discourse becomes toxic. Fans argue about intent, media debates fairness instead of strategy, players get labeled instead of protected, and the actual issue, bad officiating, gets buried under noise. This is exactly what the league can't afford right now. Because the more chaotic the officiating feels, the harder it is to keep the focus where it belongs, on the game itself. Every blown call becomes another clip. Every no-whistle moment becomes another controversy, and the cycle feeds itself. The scary part: none of this is new. The difference is that now, people are finally refusing to look away. And that's why the league's response matters so much, because the next step determines whether this moment leads to real change or just louder arguments. According to reports, the league has formed a new committee specifically tasked with addressing officiating concerns. Meetings have been held, discussions are happening, and for the first time, officiating reform is officially on the agenda, not just a talking point in press conferences. On paper, that sounds promising. But fans have heard this before. Committees get formed, conversations happen, statements are released, and then nothing changes on the court. That's why skepticism is high. People aren't asking for acknowledgement anymore. They're asking for action, tangible improvement, consistency they can actually see during games. The key question is whether the league knows there's a problem. It's whether they're willing to invest in fixing it. That means better pay, better training, better accountability, and a clear standard for what crosses the line, especially when it comes to player safety. Without those things, no committee can solve this. And that's why this moment feels pivotal. The league has unprecedented attention, unprecedented growth, and unprecedented pressure to get this right. If they do, the WNBA could come out of this stronger, safer, and more credible than ever. If they do, they risk squandering the very momentum they've worked so hard to build. This isn't just about Caitlin Clark. It's about every player who's taken unnecessary contact, every coach who's lost faith in consistency, every fan who wants to enjoy the game without wondering who might get hurt next. For years, the WNBA lived with this problem because it could. Now it can't. The spotlight is too bright, the audience is too big, and the stakes are too high. Officiating isn't a side issue anymore, it's central to the league's future. Fixing it means protecting players, restoring trust, and delivering a product that feels fair, competitive, and safe. This moment offers a rare opportunity. A chance to correct years of neglect, to modernize officiating, to protect stars without watering down the game, and to prove that growth doesn't just mean more viewers, it means higher standards. What happens next will say everything. Because if the league follows through, this could be remembered as the moment the WNBA finally turned a corner. And if it does, fans will remember that too.